Thank you for tuning into the Reality-ReDesign podcast. I'm the artist formerly known as Blake Art. Podcast number 5 is an impromptu meeting with my old friend, mentor, and influence, Laird Scranton. I was introduced to Laird, like everyone, via the John Anthony West and Chase Gardiner's brilliant Magical Egypt series in episode number 8 of the first installment. West and Chance devoted a whole bonus episode to his Magical Egypt series just based on Laird's research in the Dogon tribe via his groundbreaking books, Hidden Meanings, a study of the founding symbols of civilization, and The Science of the Dogon, decoding the African mystery tradition. The way Laird connects computer coding to the different symbolic representations of different ancient cultures is mind-blowing to say the least. He single-handedly opened a whole new area of groundbreaking research that is well respected worldwide. I was very fortunate to meet Laird in person at the Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge in 2014, where I targeted him and fellow speaker Lauren Carpenter with my original concept, the job spectrum mechanism. Laird was the first person to really grasp the pre-existing notion that I am still trying to manifest. We've always kept in touch sparsely through Facebook, exchanging birthday wishes and whatnot, but it was very synchronistic this past couple of weeks. The rapid changing landscape of this particular time we all share right now made me reach out to Laird spontaneously, and he was eager to chat. And we had over an hour-long talk where I was barely able to hang on and grasp his mind-blowing revelations. Another synchronicity, we both had revelations that same day about the different aspects of what we're both trying to bring into this world. We both thoroughly enjoyed the podcast and are going to do it again soon. I hope you enjoy it as much as we did, talking about swimming in the deep end, so to speak. So the Reality-ReDesign podcast number 5, an hour-long chat with my colleague and friend, Laird Scranton. I wish we could have gotten that what you just said on the recording, Laird, but
okay. Well, here, I can say it again. That basically the new book centers on, it's an outgrowth of understanding that a French physicist named Louis de Broglie, who was a colleague of Einstein's and of Schrödinger, of Heisenberg, and people like that.
Right.
In 1927, he'd published a paper where he had figured out mathematically that the stable orbits of the electron and a hydrogen atom coincide with the points of resonance of energy. And that's why when light's emitted from those stable orbits, you get frequencies that are coincide with colors of light and things like that.
Say the bit about the waves, quantum physics with the waves and the particles and how they quanta.
Everything rests at the bottom level on something called a wave center. The structure of an electron derives from multiple wave centers. A wave center you can think of as the Egyptian sun glyph. It's a circle with a dot in the center.
Cool.
Basically.
Right.
And the center at the level of an electron, the center of the wave center is a neutrino. So when you have one wave center, you don't have anything.
Right.
But as soon as you have two wave centers interacting with each other, you you're producing an inward and an outward flowing wave, and the interactions of those two waves, is with magnetism and electricity, each energy is evoking the other energy as it moves.
Right.
And so those waves are moving persistently into and out of phase with each other. And when that happens, you create beat frequencies. A beat frequency is, you're familiar with the concept. If you've ever driven your car on a highway and opened just one window, you heard a waka, 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 waka.
Yes! Oh my God, that drives me nuts.
A beat frequency. Well, if you're talking about sound, what's going on is that as the waves are in certain orientation to each other, they self-defeat. And so the sound becomes very quiet. In the other orientation to each other, they self-reinforce, and so the sound becomes very loud. And you go through this, loudening and quieting of the sound over and over and over again in beats. And those are the quanta of energy. And it's because of this that we see energy as being both particle-like and wave-like at the same time.
Yes, but yeah, You're going to love what I'm going to show you eventually at some point. But let me ask you this. Why the third eye? Why? How does that relate?
Okay. The geometry of the beat frequency is indistinguishable from the shape of an eye, of an unbrowed Egyptian eye glyph. Okay. Rene Guénon, who is sort of the go-to guy on Hindu metaphysics, says that the proper orientation symbolically of symbols that are surrogates for the eye or the eye itself is between the Egyptian left eye and the Egyptian right eye. So the proper way to think about that is as a third eye. And
wow.
You can place it in the center of the forehead as they do in India.
Yep.
Okay.
Rods and cones in the pineal gland, or whatever, however you pronounce it. How do you pronounce it? Pineal gland?
Pineal, right. Yes, I would say the similar idea. So in the Dogon conception, okay, we have a single set cluster of dynamics of energy that play out in similar form on all scales. It doesn't matter what level you look at it at. The dynamics of those energies are the same. So what that means is, if you understand how dynamics of energy work on a macrocosmic scale with spinning energy, you don't have to guess how they work on the quantum scale, because it's going to be parallel to what it was. So now a researcher can choose to look at this stuff from the perspective of the lowest dimensional perspective. If you do that, you end up with very simplified dynamics. There ends up being only really one candidate for every function of physics. Okay, if you look at it from a higher dimensional perspective, you get a lot more nuance about how the energies really interact. But the way that stars form is no different from the way that monopoles of energy form. It's exactly the same thing. And that dynamic is no different from the way that raindrops form, because the dynamics of energy are inherently the dynamics of water. And there's a reason for that. When energy first manifests, it manifests in the form of three monopoles. I need to back up here. In the Dogon conception, these dynamics of energy play out in a continuum. There are two energies involved. There's magnetism and there's electricity. And those persistently try to move from a domain where magnetism is dormant and electrical flow is unimpeded, to a second state where the reverse of that's true. The magnetic flux is unimpeded and electricity is dormant. And they move, once each state automatically evokes the other state. So there's an oscillation that happens back and forth between the two energies that you can't stop from happening. But across that oscillation, if you imagine that oscillation as playing out in the shape of an almond, this is the outline of an eye, that domain of energy has a tendency to self-differentiate into smaller domains, the same way that if you go out in the ocean into very deep seawater self-differentiates into biological zones. And the kind of life you have persisting at the surface of the water is very different than the kind of life you have on the floor of the ocean.
Right.
And all that depends on, how much sunlight does the life need and prefer? What kind of water pressure does it prefer? What kind of temperature does it prefer? All of these factors play into what kind of life you get at those different levels. Well, the domain of energy is the same way. Now, those domains, across that continuum, the Dogon say there are 14 domains that naturally self-evoke.
Wow. Are we only one of them? Is this only one of them?
This is only one of them. We sit at the 10th step up that staircase. So there are four steps that move beyond what we see, and 10 that reach up to us. That's why the opening to the Great Pyramid is set 2/3 of the way up the north side. That corresponds to where we sit in this continuum of energy. These shrine structures symbolize that continuum.
Wow. That's amazing. So, that's a lot to unpack. Like that shape, for instance, in the flower of life, the Vesica Pisces.
Right.
That's the shape of the almond.
Right, that's right. And it accrues from having two circular waves of energy that overlap each other. This is the geometry that Buddhism uses to align a stupa. It's basically the evocation of multiple wave centers.
Wow, that makes me think of all that stuff in Indonesia, all those temples they unearthed with the 72 stupas on it and all that other. I mean,
right.
They knew what was going on and we don't.
Right. Now, the Dogen system is really interesting because whoever put it together focused on reducing fractions for us. Everything is based on the most generic form, and then those become building blocks that they build upward from. Even the Dogen language works that way. Every syllable represents a concept, and you construct more complicated concepts by combining the right syllables together. If I know how a Dogen word is pronounced, I know what the intended meaning of the word was. The Egyptian hieroglyphs work the same way. Every glyph represents a concept. If you substitute concepts for glyphs, every word defines its own meaning. It produces a little sentence that tells you what the scribe meant when he wrote the word.
Yeah, it's like English was designed to, I don't know, it's a more flowery thing, but it's, spelling, right?
Right. Okay, now, in the Dogen system, they managed to scientifically accurately describe how energy moves from a domain of pure energy to a domain of matter with atoms and such things, never using a geometric figure that's more complex than a circle, a square, or a triangle, and never using a mathematical value that's more complicated than 3.2 as an approximation of pi.
Right.
So the flower of life figures are interesting, but they're overkill. You don't need them to understand what's going on with the energy.
Got it. It's more like a visual, geometrical perfection.
Yeah, it's an extension of what those produce. And so it's not that it's incorrect, it's that we don't need those as building blocks to put the system together.
That's crazy. So another question about the Dogon. So have you heard of the Eye of Africa?
Yes, I've heard of the Eye of Africa, and the concept of an eye is pivotal here precisely because that eye shape of the beat frequency is the key structure. So the Dogon are not far from that. I mean, I know Africa is gigantic. Right.
But supposedly that Eye of Africa has it was swept away in a gigantic cataclysm, and there's evidence. What tells us that is Google Earth. I mean, you can see it. You can see where it came down from the north and swept all that stuff out to the freaking Atlantic.
Yeah, similar to the Grand Coulee area in Washington State. I grew up near there.
Yeah, the Scablands, Randall Carlson.
Yeah.
Graham Hancock. I'm all over that stuff. And another thing I'm all over too, and I noticed this when I was putzing around trying to get your info on LinkedIn or whatever, or Facebook, we're both friends with Alan Green.
Oh, right.
So, and I jumped in. I mean, you saw his latest thing. Did you see his latest thing?
I didn't see the latest thing he said.
Oh my God, Laird, it's so crazy. This reality, the important work of what you do is the frickin' nuts and bolts of how consciousness is put together. I mean,
right, and actually I picked up new insights just today into how that actually plays out, and it's all the same dynamics of energy that produce matter.
So this is the great unveiling. I have a feeling this could be an important conversation because I'm the same way, but I'm nobody from nowhere. You've got books, you're established.
Well, I'm nobody from nowhere also. I mean, I read books by Melodoma Patrice Sommet, who speaks with authority about the subjects that I write about, but he has the personal experience and qualifications to actually talk about it. I don't.
Right. Yeah, but it's if we can explain it, if we can. my big challenge my whole life, when I saw you out at CPAC in 2014 or whatever it was, and you were like, oh, it's a big thing. You were the first person to actually understand what the hell I was trying to do, right?
Yeah.
The first. But that speaks, I mean, and I'm not trying to be smarter than the average bear here. I'm not that smart.
I mean, they're smart and they're smart. I mean, being able to, consciousness is the ability to see a thing in overview, then break it down into its component pieces, and then put it back together again. That's what the energetics allow us to do. Well, okay. Another important piece of the energetics, back to de Broglie's paper. What he realized was there were two oscillations that were critical to a hydrogen atom. Wow. And they're both magnetically driven.
Yeah, magnetism.
One is the oscillation that, he says they're driven by what he calls the cyclical presence of magnetism for the orbiting electron and for the components of the proton. And he graphed those oscillations. But the graphs he produced happened to take the same shapes as two Egyptian glyphs. One of them is the almond glyph I was talking about. The other one is a zigzag line. Now you go to Egyptian hieroglyphics and you look for words written with just those two glyphs, and you turn up things like that Budge refers to as the divine name. But more importantly, you turn up words whose phonetics tell you what they mean. The phonetics he interprets as REN, R-E-N or R-E-N-N, but in terms of cosmological syllables, it should properly be Re-Na. Re is a syllable that represents the concept of energy, and Na is a syllable that refers to the non-material feminine. So this is the energy of the non-material feminine. This is the hidden energy of a hydrogen atom. It's called the resonant energy. It's an aspect. I had at one point written a chapter about the hydrogen atom for one of my books, and I thought I had included in it everything that was significant about a hydrogen atom, and then suddenly came across these references to resonant energy. The way I came across them was bizarre. That a friend of mine who's very spiritually connected sent me a picture of a crop circle in the UK, that had just formed.
Wow!
And I could see that the crop circle was representing the shape of a water molecule, but at the center of it were these structures, almond-shaped structures that I didn't know what they were. And when I researched it, I figured out these are the resonant states of the water molecule. I suddenly realized there's a whole aspect to this stuff that the average person doesn't see because they're not thinking about resonance as being a thing. They're only thinking about the physical expressions of things. And so once I started looking at what resonance does, I realized that's the key to everything. Resonance is one of the huge keys to everything. It's the key to what produces the beat frequencies.
Right. And it also, would you not say that when you walk into like a cathedral or an ancient building, that feeling you get,
right,
it's resonating with you?
That's right. That's the same thing that Om is a physical expression of resonance. We have lots of people saying Om at the same time. You're creating resonance.
Right. And you've been to the pyramid, right? Have you been to them?
No, actually, I've never been to Egypt. John Anthony West wanted me to go, but I never really had a compelling reason or opportunity to go. The only places I've been, or I really have been to the Orkney Islands, which is central to all this. Okay, now these two oscillations correspond to two modes of time. I was confused at first because the Egyptian hieroglyphic language has two specific glyphs that represent the concept of time. I thought, why do they need two? Those oscillations relate to those two modes of time. One is produced by oscillations of the two poles of the proton magnet that are so ultra quick they occur at almost the speed of light.
Sure.
And so they're so fast we can't measure them. So de Broglie considers them theoretical because we can't measure them. The other oscillation is the linear motion of the electron around the atom. That happens at about 2% at the speed of light. And that produces an environment of time that is quantum coherent. And the way to understand what I mean by that is it compares to a jazz combo where every player in the combo has ultimate freedom to play what they want. But as long as it's in the context of whatever the piece is that the entire group's doing. Now, every event that happens...
What a great analogy.
Right. Every event that happens simultaneously affects both of those oscillations. And so, from the perspective of the ultra quick one, every event happens at once.
Oh, shit, yeah.
Whereas
that's the eternal now.
From the perspective of the linear oscillation, all of those events are now put into a sequence. This is the same effect as an index over a data file.
See, and you know all that stuff because you were a coder.
Right, that's right. Now, the thing is that just because it happens to evolve in the same way, in the same binary form through consistent, division of things, we divide one thing into two into four, and so on, that's a binary sequence. We all are only familiar with binary sequences because of computers, and so we take the leap of inference, in my opinion, the incorrect leap, that we're looking at the function of a computer. Right. We're not. It just happens to be a binary process. There are other processes that also look like holographic processes that are natural processes, but don't necessarily mean that we're living in a hologram. Though, if you have one set of dynamics of energy that are playing out repeatedly in the same way, they're going to evoke the same structures again and again and again in larger and larger forms. That's hologram.
Right. Well, yeah. And well, I mean, my mind's kind of blown right now, and I'm just kind of scrambling. But I mean, you're touching upon like the machinery of how consciousness generates itself, and also proving and showing with the way it drops right into my latest thing that I would love to show you at some point. I don't think we have time today because you've got to go. It's 5:00. But I would love to schedule another Zoom call with you because I've got to. I look like this now because I'm a philosopher as well as an artist, right? And I have a crazy job spectrum idea, which is still hot and in the running. And I had a revelation today about that as well because it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy, Laird, and I'd love to share it with you. But let me just can I share my screen with you for a quick minute?
Sure, why not?
Because this is going to speak to all the things you were just talking about.
Okay.
So this is my philosophy, Reality-ReDesign, and I've got some slides here which I could go over with you at another time. But I'm a knowledge conduit, and let me show you. Where are you on here? You're on here somewhere. Where are you?
That's okay.
There you are, right there.
Oh, yes.
So you're one of my big influences.
Well, thanks.
With all these other people. I got to put Alan in here. Alan's on my website, actually. And we should end with that because he found secret code within the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights.
Wow, amazing.
His Shakespeare, Freemason stuff is in there. I mean, they were sending, there was a story beneath the story, behind the story behind the story. And this is, I have a feeling we all have roles in this, the great unveiling. And this is what turns your crank. You love the discovery of the finding out of the why. I am the exact same way. Why is this happening? So, here's my job spectrum thing. This is how I see things. And it's like an Egyptian hieroglyph. You would just make it a simple, curve. But then we got to talk to the ruling class at some point. We got to start over. That's my big contentment. So I did this thing called the top 13 tenets of simulation assumptionism. That's my philosophy. My philosophy is that we assume there's a simulation. Doesn't mean there is one, or it doesn't mean there isn't one. But
it plays out as if it were a simulation, but The problem is that if we come to the conclusion that it's a simulation, all we've done is kick the can down the road in terms of how did it come about.
Exactly.
You get to the bottom of it, at some point you have to say things came about through natural processes. I'll give you an example.
Good.
The natural water cycle we see as a perpetual cycle.
Right.
There's no start, there's no end to it. But if you apply a little intelligence to the concept, you realize it had to have begun with the formation of a water molecule.
Right. God thinking about being God and what those initial thoughts were.
Now, when matter materializes, or when energy first materializes, it materializes as three monopoles. And the continuum of energy we were talking about moves from a state that is actually superconductive to a state that is super insulating.
Right.
At the superconductive end, the three monopoles you get are two monopoles of magnetism and one monopole of electricity. The dynamic of those three monopoles is indistinguishable from the dynamic among the three atoms of a water molecule, which is why energy plays out like water. At the other end of the spectrum, which is actually the place where things begin for the Dogen. The Dogen put magnetism as being prior to electricity, and at the superinsulating end of the scale, magnetism is unresisted. So things begin there, and the Dogen say that they refer to that as the first attempt of Amma to create a universe.
Wow.
And
Okay.
It failed because, in their words, it didn't make water. Now, the way we understand that is the three monopoles that are being evoked at that end of the scale are two electrical and one magnetic.
Right.
If we've compared magnetism to the two magnetic monopoles to the two hydrogen atoms and the one electrical monopole to the oxygen atom, that creates water. But on the other end of the scale, it doesn't. It creates something called hydroperoxyl. And hydroperoxyl has the attribute of deconstructing matter, not of constructing it.
So does it exist physically?
Yeah, hydroperoxyl exists physically, but it has none of the same properties as a water molecule.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Why? So water molecules, I mean, they register in my artwork. I've used them a number of times in my most recent piece that I did. But from an artistic point of view, it has nothing to do with like the technical aspects of what you're describing. Why do water molecules freeze when they form snowflakes in such geometrical, beautiful patterns that seem to be symmetrical? How does that happen?
Yeah, I don't have insights on how that specifically happens, but I do know that phase transitions like that are one of the critical factors all the way up the scale. Everything is a phase transition. And there are Egyptian glyphs to represent concepts of phase transitions. There's something science calls branching, and there's an Egyptian branch glyph that is symbolic of the idea of a phase transition.
Wow. That is, well, there so much is going on right now. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I do. There's an awful lot going on, and the pace of this information that is sort of becoming clear is picking up speed. I mean, there are days when I'm getting more stuff than I can write down.
Yeah. And I tried to go into your Facebook feed. I got about 8 hours ago, and you had like 10 posts, and it's like,
yes, I know.
I mean, well, it's coming fast and furious. It really is. And I had an insight today as well, and it's about the job spectrum. And, I've been trying to force feed this to people and them just not getting it. And it's because I'm trying to assign value to the different jobs we do. That's what it is. It's through the survey. But I had an epiphany today too, just like you did. What if we, all these jobs or all these things that we want our government to do, put them in a survey and run it through the survey where you assign value to how prevalent is this job to society? How, right. What will it take to make it happen? Could it happen in a day, or will it take years? And then how easy is it or how difficult is it to implement, and have everybody assign the value to it, and have the citizens of this country, this republic,
prioritize what we're going to do
on a monthly basis, month to month. That's a cool idea.
That's a very cool idea. I mean, just to set an agenda.
Right. And then it can change. And then what they were pouring in on a monthly basis with all this money, it could allocate it according to how it's ranked month to month to month.
Right.
So we could gamify democracy and capitalism within our republic.
Right.
And that's three-legged stool. We are a republic. We are sovereign. We control our own destiny. We're free thinkers. We are a democracy where we have rules and laws. We've got the three branches of the country, and then we've got capitalism. How we provide for ourselves, how we make money, how we take care of ourselves. And the droids are taking our jobs, and AI is getting rid of all the work we used to do.
Bill Gates said the other day that eventually, AI is going to take over most of the things that humans do.
Well, this is something new for humans to do.
Right.
And
that's fine, because as I was growing up, the outlook was that technology was going to free us from doing all the mundane stuff, and we'd be free to pursue art and literature and poetry and things like that. I don't know that we'll actually get to that, but as AI becomes the more efficient way to accomplish things that people do, then they're going to have to, the corporations are going to want AI to do it instead of having people do it, and that will naturally free people in one way or another. And if they want, economies don't work without people, because machines don't buy things.
Right. Exactly. That's it's like Gödel Escher Bach, the eternal golden braid. Republic, democracy, capitalism, intertwined. And then to run it, you organize it through another Gödel Escher Bach braid. You use communism, socialism, and again, capitalism, money. That's what money makes the world go around. It's the blood and the oxygen that provides the health of the body.
The blind spot right now is that every time you throw up obstacles in the way of individuals being able to support themselves financially, you're also undercutting everything that makes the corporations work. And, people like Henry Ford understood that. People like Elon Musk don't seem to.
Right. Yeah. Well, or Jeff Bezos. He lost money forever because he undercut his own success to drive everybody else out of business until it became a monopolistic, endeavor. And that's, it's not fair. That's a tilted playing field.
It's also self-defeating. And so that's one of the dynamics that's playing out right now is what's self-defeating and what isn't.
Right. I agree. Here, let me show you this real quick.
Okay.
This is so I've got the top 13 tenets of simulation assumptionism. This is tenet number 4. This is exactly what you were describing earlier. It's not quantum physics, it's just physics in a simulation.
Uh-huh.
The double slit, I'm going to just read it to you. The double split experiment suggests what we call particles, such as electrons, somehow combine characteristics of particles and characteristics of waves, which is exactly what you were kind of talking about, I think.
Right.
That famous wave-particle duality problem of quantum mechanics. It also suggests that the act of observing or measuring a quantum system has a profound effect on the system itself.
Now, interesting. I have perspectives on that. Okay, now, what happens is, from an ancient perspective, what happens is that when we observe a quantum particle in motion, what we do is we inadvertently disrupt the resonance of the two waves that it's evoking. Okay, and when we do that, we create what is called a resonance cascade.
Okay.
And on a small enough scale the natural dynamics of energy self-correct. Their immediate response is to put the particle back in a state of resonance. But the net effect of that is, if you think of a hemispheric shape of a shrine, the particle originally sits at a point of nearest singularity at the center of the base, circular base of the hemisphere.
Okay.
When we observe it, we disrupt the resonance of the energies, and net we end up shifting the particle upward to the center of the top of the hemisphere, the place where the openings are in stone cairns, where they have an opening at the top of the cairn for inexplicable reasons.
Okay.
This is symbolic of that.
Okay.
And so what we've done is we've forced the energy to misstate to us where the particle was at the time we tried to observe it. And we've also disrupted its momentum. So net Heisenberg uncertainty comes about because that's the way the energies work.
Wow.
There's another principle called, I think, resonance collapse that's also involved in that process. But resonance cascade is the primary one.
Okay.
Now, at the point where you have moved the particle to the top of the hemisphere, that's where light, at that point of resonance, the resonance minimizes resistance, and so light is able to be emitted into the macrocosm. And so the only view we ever get of an electron in an atom, a hydrogen atom, is in one of the stable orbits of the atom. Even though it's constantly shifting position upward and downward between orbits, we never see it except in one of the stable orbits. And the reason is because that's the point from which light is emitted.
Is that the PO that the Dogon's called, the PO?
The PO, yeah. The Dogon understand that this electron in a hydrogen atom is moving through, physicist named Gamow, George Gamow, diagrammed 14 orbital paths that the electron in a hydrogen atom normally takes.
It's an XYZ, they're dumbbells in an XYZ thing. That's the picture.
Now, those 14 orbital paths correspond to the 14 domains of energy the Dogons say the spectrum of energy self-differentiates into. So that electron is effectively moving through all 14 of those domains.
All the time.
Yeah, and conceptually it may be binding together the electron, or the atom. Now, when it gets to its nearest approach to the proton, each of those orbits that get closer and closer to where the proton is, the electron moves quicker and quicker. But contrary to what Einstein says, as it moves quicker, it's not gaining mass. The reason for that is that those domains of energy are differentiated by a progressively slowing pace of time by factors of 10, the same way the electromagnetic spectrum is. And so you have the electron moving more quickly because it's in a context where time moves more quickly, not because it's accelerated. Without acceleration, you don't create mass.
That's correct. So, okay. So I think I see. So that what would cause the electrons to crunch down faster towards the proton? What causes that? Is that magnetism?
Well, yes. What the electron is doing is it's shifting between domains of energy within that continuum of energy. And that moves from a very, very slow domain of energy and to a very, very ultra quick one. And when it gets down to the point where it's the ultra quick one, it's moving at almost the speed of light, which is the speed of the oscillations of the poles of the proton. Now everything's moving at the speed of light, which is the place from which the monopoles originally manifested. And so you put those monopoles back into a posture of having to behave like a proton-electron pair because of their speed.
All right, I think I might have got lost on that one.
Okay, when the monopoles originally appear, before they originally appear, they're moving at the speed of light.
Okay.
Okay, and when they first appear, when they first manifest at very nearly the speed of light, they exist as a proton-electron pair. This is the base unit of materialized matter.
Right.
Okay, now as their oscillations cause a relative change in speed between what the electron's doing and what the poles of the proton are doing, we see that as the electron moving away from the proton. We see that as an expansion of space.
Got it.
I'll try to explain why that happens. Okay, if you were an objective observer and you could measure exactly what the duration of time was, that's the basic unit of time,
Mm-hmm.
light would be able to extend a certain distance during that period. Now, if someone were to come in unbeknownst to you while you were sleeping and double that objective duration of time, light would now have twice as long to extend as it had before. And so we would perceive light as extending twice as far as it had before. And so we would perceive space as expanding when it might not really be expanding. What we might be seeing is effectively a magnification of view. That the distance that already separated electricity from magnetism now looks bigger because we're getting a magnified view of it. And that looks like the expansion of space to us.
Wow.
So as the electron is moving through these domains and its apparent speed is quickening and quickening and quickening, what we're really observing is it moving through domains where time moves quicker and quicker and quicker. We get down to the level where time is moving as quickly as it is for the proton, and we've recreated a proton-electron pair. This is a neutron. It's indistinguishable from a proton-electron pair. But the natural dynamic of the proton-electron pair is for the oscillations to slow, and as it slows, the electron jumps at the speed of light to one of its stable orbits, one of the resonance points.
Right. Okay.
Well, it looks like a leap to us, but it isn't. It's moving in a causal way. It looks like a leap to us because we can't measure a thing that moves at the speed of light.
That's yeah. So and an electron, I mean, a water or a hydrogen molecule. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Does it just have one proton and no neutrons, or does it have one proton and one neutron?
A hydrogen atom has one proton and one electron.
Okay, but no neutrons.
No, but no atom has a neutron. They've realized now that a neutron is just a transitional stage of the proton and the electron when they come close together, because they transition back into a proton-electron pair, which is a neutron.
Well, they're going to have to go back and redraw all those billiard balls.
Yeah, this is one of my concerns when I was studying the Dogen system. One of my confusions was they describe protons and electrons. They don't describe neutrons. As it turns out, they do have a concept of a neutron. But net, it's just the combination of the recombining of the electron with the proton.
Well, do you think that in regards to all this action, this is kind of quantum physics that we're diving in and out of kind of how everything works on that really small level?
Right.
So it's my, as simulation assumptionism, and I really enjoy your view of kicking the can down, because it doesn't answer any questions. What my simulation assumptionism is made to be kind of a pivot point so that we can deal with each other as human beings without having to screw each other over and kill each other and act like jerks to each other. If we are all kind of figure out...
This does work like a simulation, but there's also another level to this, that you have two domains. You have an energetic domain and a material domain. The reason you have that is because it also self-differentiates. What precedes a superconductive state are what are called instanton knots. When Hawking energy evaporates from a black hole. It evaporates as instanton knots. Any domain, any bound domain of energy or of water automatically produces these knots.
Wow.
Those knots carry the potential to manifest three monopoles. So in the superconductive domain, circumstances in that domain can randomly or because of let's back up again here. In a superconductive domain, you have a flow of electricity that is perpetual. It's unresisted and it's perpetual. But random events and external events can disrupt that circuit. And when the circuit gets disrupted, you create a spark. And the spark automatically raises the level of the flow. Okay, the flow of the electricity is at a level just below where it would evoke magnetism. The spark raises that level of the electrical flow just high enough so that now it evokes two monopoles of magnetism, because electricity is inherently one-dimensional energetically, and an electrical spark is inherently equivalent to a geometric point energetically.
Right.
Whereas magnetism is the equivalent of a geometric line energetically. So there's a whole concept of energetic dimensionality that goes along with linear dimensionality, but is a separate thing.
And that to me, when you were invoking those terms, I immediately was thinking of geometry. And
right,
how
because dimensionality is defined inherently in terms of geometry and in terms of how that geometry expresses itself in geometric forms. Now from Einstein's point of view, a geometric point has no dimensionality. From the ancient point of view, the geometric point is the point of linkage between energetic dimensionality and linear dimensionality. A geometric point has the attribute of duration.
And time, when that appears at that point.
Right. So when those monopoles manifest, because a spark happens, you've disrupted the circuit of the superconductive domain and you've created a spark and you've evoked three monopoles. The spark itself and the two magnetic poles. Those become a unit, which is a proton-electron pair, but the input of energy causes them to rotate as a unit. And when they rotate, now, if you think that magnetism is linear, the poles of the magnet can only sit in two orientations. In root form, they can only sit. You can think of it as one above the other, or one the other. Reverse that, one below the other. When they rotate as a unit, now that unit sits anti-parallel to the rest of the superconductive domain, and the Meissner effect kicks in, and that unit is now forced out of the domain because it sits anti-parallel magnetically to the rest of the domain, forces the proton-electron pair out. And so what you're doing is you're one little magnet at a time. You're self-differentiating a material domain from a non-material domain.
And that happens like instantaneously all the time.
Right. Now as that unit, that proton-electron pair unit is moving outward, the oscillations within that unit are forcing the electron outward from the proton-electron pair.
And does that slow it down?
It slows the electron down, yes, because it's moving it through these domains of energy that are self-differentiating.
Okay.
It doesn't slow it down in terms of Einstein acceleration. It slows it down in terms of pace of time.
Okay, you said something earlier about, and you used your hands like this, the something effect. The
Meissner effect.
So can you explain that briefly?
The Meissner effect is an attribute of a superconductive domain that automatically forces any externally introduced magnetism out of the domain.
So it's like a force field.
It does that for this exact same reason, because that external magnetism is sitting in an opposite orientation to the domain, And so just as you have two magnets where if you position them the right way, they push apart.
Right.
Position them the other way, they pull together.
Yeah.
Well, in the superconductive domain, it's unity because they all pull together. Introduce outside magnetism, it sits the other way, it's now forced out. And so now it's like a game of Mahjong. In Mahjong, you start with all the tiles, ivory tiles face down, and you flip them one at a time over. That's all that's happening with energy in this continuum is one little magnet at a time. We're flipping the magnets over.
Wow. That is, I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. I know. So maybe that's a good place for us to stop here, and then we'll try to get back
think
to
so.
and we'll talk about some of the other concerns. But
for sure,
this is the only subject that's discussed in the symbolic cosmology is the interaction of these two energies. That's the only subject.
In the Dogon.
Everything comes down to that.
I think it's the ending, a great ending point and a great beginning point, because that's kind of how it works. Right. It's kind of always, I mean, this is kind of a Vesica Pisces right here with the modalities, or however you were saying it. That's the thing that's the hardest for me to grasp.
Let me tell you another story. After I wrote my first book, a friend of John Anthony West's contacted me by email. This is somebody I didn't know. He lived in New York City and he wanted to get together to talk about the book. So I said, sure, why not? I had an adult son living in New York City who wanted to join us, and my wife, Risa, wanted to come with us.
Sure.
I said, do you mind if I bring my wife? He said, no. So he arranged for us to meet at a diner. And at the very last minute, he asked me if he could bring a friend. And I said, sure, why not? Turns out it wasn't a quote-unquote friend. This was his spiritual advisor. And the meeting wasn't with him, it was with her. She was such an odd person that my wife and my son and I all perceived her somewhat differently from each other. She presented like what we used to call a bag lady.
Right.
She was completely unkempt. She ate food with her fingers stuffing food in her mouth. She was a very distasteful person. But the entire meeting consisted of her asking me a series of personal questions about my life. And I would give her an answer, and then she would demonstrate to me how my answer illustrated some important aspect of the symbolism I was writing about. So the first question she asked me was, she said, tell me how you conceive of your marriage. And I said, I've always conceptualized our marriage as the large overlap of two circles. She said, that's a symbol. That's called a Vesica Pisces. Do you realize that? What I didn't realize at the time was that is the ancient symbol for marriage.
Right.
Now, I had an intuitive sense of it, but I had no understanding of it.
That's awesome.
And the entire meeting went that way. The last question she asked me was, about 45 minutes later, was, did I have any sense of who developed the system of symbols that I was exploring? And I said, no, I didn't know who developed it, but I had enough understanding to realize that what would eventually tell me who. And she said, did you just say what will tell me who? And I said, yeah. And she said, we're done here. And she got up and she left. I came back to Albany. By the time I got back to Albany, there was an email waiting for me from another person I didn't know, a woman in Australia who claims to be psychic. Since that time, I have met her several times. She said all of her psychic friends in Australia were in a dither because they knew about the meeting in New York City, and they were upset because I had just been granted permission to research things they wanted to research.
Wow.
Yeah.
What would tell me who?
What will tell me who, right.
Well, that's very similar to the I am that I am.
Yes, well, yes, except I think that's also a mistranslation. The same Hebrew words that get translated I am that I am can also be translated to mean I am, my name is, I am.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is a different take on the phrase. Now, as far as what will tell me who, there have been numbers of points as I've been doing my research over the past 3 decades where I've I've sort of conjectured. I said, if I had been the one who had designed this system, I would have been sure to do blah de blah. And then I would go take a look for it and realize that whoever put the system together did that thing, just the thing I needed them to do. At times, it has so closely resembled my own work that I'm confused. It looks like my work. For all the world, it looks like my work. So it may yet be that there's a perspective from which the work that I'm doing is what ultimately produces this symbolic system.
Life reflects art, life reflects art.
Are you familiar with a film called Somewhere in Time?
Yeah, Christopher Reeve.
Right. Now, there's no explanation in that film where the watch comes from.
Right.
That's what this system looks like to me. It looks like the research I'm doing to sort out what the symbolism is about, maybe what fed the development of the symbolism.
Well, and I've been saying, the job spectrum mechanism. It's a mechanism, or a part. Like it's like you're describing with all the. I mean, it's like the gears in the watch moving super fast. You can't see it. It's like with the manifolds with the spark and the two things. I mean, it's all like the movement of that keeps this thing going and keeps it's fun. I mean, it's fun most of the time. I mean, life is fraught with danger and sorrow and all kinds of other stuff. But you and I right now are having a great time because this is what I know you love talking about this. I love talking to you about this stuff. I love talking about my stuff. And
one more important aspect of the continuum of energy before I have to go.
Sure.
Those domains of energy coincide with Hinduism's levels of consciousness.
Wow.
Okay, now those domains of energy, those levels of consciousness have personalities and they have names. And I know what some of the names are. The most primordial, we had talked about the most primordial level of consciousness. This is expressed by those two graph shapes that de Broglie developed for the hydrogen atom. I said he expressed the phonetics as Ren, Budge expressed the phonetics as Ren or R-E-N or R-E-N-N, but it should properly be ReNa. Well, ReNa, as it turns out, is the proper name for the most primordial level of energy, of consciousness. It's expressly not deified. René Guénon says that consciousness is a manifested form. It's a byproduct of manifested energy. It can't be primordial. And metaphysically, it can't be primordial. That the same dynamics of energy that produce matter also produce consciousness. So the effect is more like yeast and bread dough.
Okay.
That the bread dough rises because the yeast is growing, but the yeast is only growing because of the nutrition in the bread dough. These are concurrent processes, concurrently mutually evoking processes.
Right.
One doesn't precede the other. Same thing with the expansion of space and the concept of time. These come about through a mutual dynamic. One doesn't happen before the other one.
Right. Would you say it's based, would a good word for that be principles?
Well, these are our primary concepts. What precedes all of that, what precedes consciousness is potentials. Yeah, like same concept as principles. Hinduism refers to them as potentials.
Okay.
And so anything that is more differentiated than a general principle has to be a manifested form. It can't be primordial.
Wow.
And so a conscious thought only forms in the context of time. If you imagine that it forms outside of the concept of time, then my question to you is, how does that context differ from time? It doesn't.
Okay. I'm glad you answered that because I didn't know.
Time is a manifested effect, just as consciousness is.
Right. Time is almost also a measurement type thing.
Right, which is a manifested thing. Measurement itself, the concept of measurement is entirely manifested. It's not primordial.
Right.
Although, to be fair, that magnetic oscillation has to pre-exist the manifestations. So that aspect of time does, from my point of view, does precede manifested forms. I'll just leave you with that. At this point, I should probably go, but
yeah.
Let's plan to get together sometime soon, and we'll talk about more of the stuff.
I can't wait to watch this. Do you mind if I post this as a blog?
Oh, go ahead. That's fine.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think hopefully it'll blow up a little bit. Hey, we got to talk about Alan next time. And
right. Well, I mean, anybody who listens to this, if they're interested in pursuing it, they need to look at one of the last two books I've written. The first one is called Amma and the Spark of the Universe, and the other one is called The Waters of Time, or the Waters of Life.
And then your third thing, The Third Eye, is coming out when?
Sometime in the coming months. I'm in the process of trying to wrap up the manuscript, but I'm hitting a moving target. So I'm just finishing up. I'm just about to do a final edit of the manuscript. I'm ready to print out a copy of the manuscript, and Risa and we'll each do a final edit on it to pick up on what things we've missed. Then after that, I have to generate an index. And then after that, the real problematic piece of it is producing a proper cover for the book.
Well, so we can talk about that, because I can help you with that.
Okay. We're talking about, I know what I want the cover to look like. I just don't have the right editing software to manage the template that Kindle Direct Publishing gives me. The software I have automatically shrinks the template when you try to work with it.
Oh, wow. What do you want on the cover?
Well, I can show you an example of the last two covers, and I can give you the image that I want to dominate the next cover. I want it formatted the same way the previous ones were, and I need to give you the various elements that would go into formulating that cover.
Do it. Let's do it. I'd love to help.
Great. I'd be happy to pay you to do it. So
that'd be awesome. I'd love it. Here's the deal. I'll put in our little Facebook chat, I'll put an email address, and if you need to send me anything bigger, I'll send you a link to my Google Doc or whatever.
Good. And I won't have the template until I know what the final size of the book is. Then that'll depend on how big the index is and other things. So it'll be a while before I get to that point, but sometime in the coming months.
Cool, man. I love it. Laird, this is great. I mean, the age of enlightenment, it's accelerating. It's good that we were able to catch up here, and let's do it again in a couple of weeks, sooner than later. And just
great.
We'll keep doing the chat. Great to see you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks
My
for doing
best to your family and your.
Yeah, me too. To yours.
See ya.
Yep.
Bye-bye.